I have tried to make this video once a year for 4 years. I just couldn't, and I could never figure out why, no matter how much it bothered me. The Outer Worlds has proven to be an anomaly in my time on YouTube. Every other time I've started to write a script after getting through a game, it flowed onto the paper like it was always meant to be there, and I was just the one making it official. And if I didn't, I always found out that I was just trying to force a video I didn't want to make, and simply dropped it instead. This was different though. Every time I play this game, I want to shout from the rooftops about how great it is and that I want everyone and anyone to play it. But I could never get more than a few pages in before the story would get to me, and I couldn't seem to express in any way what I wanted to say. But today is different. Today I know exactly what I want to say, and I think I know how to say it. I also think I've uncovered my problem. The problem with explaining the Outer Worlds lies in its biggest strength. It's the fact that it feels like no quest ever ends, it just becomes another one. Talking to one person to start a quest will start 3 more over the course of completing it, and that, while fantastic, makes it difficult to organize both my thoughts and my files on the game. If you're concerned about spoilers, know that I will be containing them to the story section of the video, and you'll be warned before that begins. For now, though, give me a chance to sell you on this game spoiler-free, assuming you haven't already played it.
Didn't I request no more fertilizer shipments be brought on board? Who keeps ordering these?
Why the fuck are there cows on my goddamn ship? The fuck is this? Obsidian Entertainment. 2 words that got me to buy a game. Now, you may not know who Obsidian is, so let me give you a quick refresher. They are responsible for multiple highly regarded RPGs in KOTOR 2, Fallout New Vegas, Neverwinter Nights 2, and one of my personal favorites, in Alpha Protocol. I bought this game on the strength of their name alone, and I was happy I did so from the word go. They really dove in and played to their strengths, having some of the best and most thought out dialogue seen in gaming. You can genuinely talk your way through this entire game, and I love that. But the other strength of theirs is that you can take essentially any path through the game you want, from being an absolute paragon finding peace where none thought it possible, to an absolute anarchist slaughtering everyone who chances across your path. This is really one of those games you can play however you like and it will work out just fine for you, assuming you're okay with accepting the consequences of your actions. But if you cared about that, you'd already have the game. And now you want to know why you should play this game if you haven't already, and well, there's a pretty simple litmus test for whether or not you'll find this game enjoyable. Step 1. Do you enjoy combat like this?
I am a
Clean cycle up to industrial stain.
Yes? Okay, moving on. Watch this.
Aliens. I'm talking about aliens. Hear me out. I'm saying it's aliens. I'm not asking you to like it. I'm not even asking you to believe it. But I need to act on this threat to the colony, and I can't do it alone.
Captain, in my humble assessment, Ms. Hagen is insane.
Did you laugh? Perfect. That's it. No, really, if those 2 moments were positives for you, then this game will be as well. The Outer Worlds is simply a 30-hour adventure across a ludicrous world full of corporate loyalty, overt exaggeration, baffling stupidity, and an almost alien disposition from the average person. Although some take that a bit too literally.
Aliens.
There are some dark, serious moments in this game, but frankly, they're few and far between, as you generally have a quirky adventure going on. No spoilers yet if you're not sold, so check out the gameplay in more detail as we dive into it. So look, combat has never been a strength of the RPG genre, and that's to be expected, and Obsidian, from all of their entries I've played, would fit into that category of poor to passable combat, which serves as nothing more than a vessel to get you from conversation to conversation, and honestly, I don't mind that, but it was nice to see a step up here. It's not phenomenal by any means, but difficulty scaled well throughout the game from my experience, at least for the most part, and if you're better at mixing up your squad than I am, the teammate abilities don't get stale until the end of the game. But how about we roll it back and look at the most basic parts of the gameplay? The weapon choice is very simple, and you've got options essentially from the word go, as you're given a ranged and melee option almost immediately. The melee combat is simple with swing and block functions you would expect, landing on targets feels consistent more or less, and when you make contact it does a great job of conveying that feel onto your screen. I would assume it's even better with rumble on a controller. The ranged options are far more my speed, however, and I could say that once I got my sense dialed in, 1919 at 400 DPI if you're curious, which is a little faster than I'm used to, but I can get away with it in a single player game. Once I found a sense that worked for me, the game actually felt great with snappy ADS speed that let me move from target to target and an utter lack of recoil that kept it from feeling like a chore to stay on target. I tended to stick to either rifles or hard-hitting handguns once I had the choice to run whatever I wanted and enjoyed the flexibility offered by mods. One issue I did have, however, is that it felt like how much damage I did to enemies was randomly chosen or determined by factors that were never explained to me. I would often hear my squad mates suggesting I try a different weapon or ammo type, but why some enemies were affected by certain ammo types and some weren't was a mystery to me. I'm willing to concede I could have checked the wiki or even looked through the codex, but truth be told, there wasn't any situation I couldn't force my way through with sheer DPS. It's fine if the answers were there, but they could have been made a bit more intuitive. Just as an example, why aren't all automechanicals weak to shock damage? And if they are, why did I so often hear that I should try a different option from my teammates? Or another example, we pick up Nyoka who defaults to a plasma-powered LMG to take on the Manosaurs on Monarch, but Mantisaurs are resistant to plasma damage? The math just isn't mathing there, and I don't get it. But whatever, I like the way the N-rays swirl around like the purple confusion of death. Teammate abilities is where combat gets a little bit more fun, but just before that, we should touch on the tactical time dilation ability. Turns out weird stuff happened to your body, and you woke up with the ability to slow time. This is one of those things that you can spec into, and on the hardest difficulties might be really useful. But for me, on my playthroughs, it was nothing but a hindrance. Often just using it because why not, or I felt like I was going to need footage. I honestly can't think of a better way to give the player some kind of unique feeling ability to set them apart from the combat, so I won't knock them too hard, but overall, it was something I more often than not just forgot about. Back to what your crew gets up to though, these are just an absolute treat. Each one of your 6 teammates has a unique move that, assuming you have the option checked off, will play in combat when you activate it, and I have to say, they absolutely nailed them. Each character's moves and various lines they can draw from in the moment fit them to a T, whether that being Ellie's space cowboy pistol fanning that you could probably know from any of the trailers of the game you've seen, or Felix yeeting himself across the battlefield to deliver a hilarious dropkick that never seems to phase enemies, making it infinitely more entertaining to watch. The crew you take with you also has a role to play outside of combat, as they can assist you with various stat checks from speech, hacking, lockpicking, medical, engineering, etc. And that really became my biggest reason for bringing them, as I was able to spec into things in a certain way knowing I could move a few points out of a skill tree because they would fill that gap. This becomes invaluable to me both in the early game when I just didn't have many points, and in the late game where I encountered the fact the base version of the game has a level cap of only 36. Now, in some aspects, I get this because it means you can never really get to a point where you're going to pass every stat check. Something is always going to be lacking and force you down a different route, which is always interesting. On the other hand, though, it is baffling to me to find out that the Spacer's Choice edition of the game has a level cap of 99. I found out afterwards that assuming you have both DLC, it's as simple as navigating to the store page and getting the upgrade to the Spacer's Choice edition, but wait, why isn't it a free update? Maybe the other things offered in the Spacer's Choice edition, such as better graphics and improved performance. Wait, what the hell am I saying? You want me to pay $10 to get what in so many other games is just a patch? After I've already paid for both the DLC, I'm sorry, I'm learning about this as I'm writing, and I have to say that's pretty unacceptable. We have a fantastic comparison in the Cyberpunk 2.0 update. You have to buy the DLC, but all the core improvements to the game are free. And while it's not live yet, from what I've heard, it's fantastic. Now, I actually wrote that before it was live. I've played it now. You've seen my review. It was fantastic. And look, I'm sorry, I'll ride with Obsidian over a lot, but there's nothing here that justifies me spending $10 on it. Especially not when the DLC that added hours of fantastic content were only $5 more. Whatever though, I'm not here to rant about the few things they got wrong. I want to talk about all the things they got right. To sum up, the combat is more than acceptable for the genre the game is in, and as a result, if you enjoyed the first 30 minutes, you'll likely enjoy the next 30 hours. One thing before we move on to the world they built. If you suffer from motion sickness regularly, or even if you don't but are you struggling with it here in this game, it is highly likely that disabling chromatic aberration will solve it for you as it did for me and many others. Alright, moving on, let's talk about Halcyon. The Outer Worlds takes place in an entirely unique universe that Obsidian came up with for the game, and it's just so damn perfect. I can't say too much without discussing spoilers, but I'll give you as much as I can. The best way I can describe it is a dystopian future that from the outside looking in is a comedy, a horror story, and a cautionary tale all wrapped up into one. Essentially, we live in a future where corporations own you and you're happy about it. But we're so deep into that no one knows any different, and the average person is more or less fine with their way of life. From things like having to pay monthly on your gravesite to a 15-minute break being a reward for a lifetime achievement, this place is a nightmare. The fun part is that because the story has you as someone who didn't grow up like this, we get to act like ourselves over the course of the game, seeing how absurd everything is and often commenting on it. You really do feel like a bit of an alien walking around this strange place with a bunch of people who look and sound human but just aren't quite right. From the hilariously bad and honestly worryingly catchy jingles from companies like Spacer's Choice,
It's not the best choice. It's Spacer's choice.
to just the general lack of backbone from anyone not holding a gun, and many who are. I generally don't comment on the art style of a game past whether or not I like it, because frankly, I just don't know anything about art and how things come to be, but today we just have to stop and talk about how visually spectacular this game is. Every time I go anywhere in this game, I am just stunned by how phenomenal it looks. From looking at the sky above Edgewater, to the magnificent biome that is Monarch, to simply walking through the doors on the Groundbreaker. It just feels like everything you see could be part of a cinematic trailer. Start to finish, this game never fails to impress with its visuals, and anyone on that art team listening, I tip my hat to you. I love a lot of games from a visual level, from the realism of Red Dead Redemption 2, the grounded feeling you get in Mass Effect where everything just feels possible, to pushing the boundaries of gaming hardware in Cyberpunk. All of those are great in their own way, but man, there's just nothing quite like what we see here in the Outer Worlds. I actually looked up the name for the art style because I just wanted to know, and as far as I can tell, it's most closely related to Atom Punk, but certainly has its own flair to it. Maybe just in the more liberal use of more vibrant colors you'll see from place to place. But beyond just the environments, the outfits characters will wear, the advertisements you'll see, everything just seems to be perfect. I don't have the words in my vocabulary to expand on everything here, so let's just leave it at I love it. Playing this game is such a weird experience because while over the course of your adventures you'll learn how to walk the walk and talk the talk in Halcyon, you'll never get away from being an outsider, an anomaly, if you will. You may know what kind of crazy you're dealing with by the end, but it never makes it any less crazy. At some points in the game, I found myself trying to speak in a manner that would be expected from someone from here, but it almost seemed as though the natives rejected it coming from me, knowing that while the words were correct, they weren't quite my own. Outside of my ship, I never really felt as though I belonged. They did an excellent job of mixing the same old problems into a new setting and making it work. I think Halcyon was great, and with The Outer Worlds 2 announced just over 2 years ago at this point, I'm desperately curious to see what they do with everything they've created. Alright, I think I've said everything I can without discussing the story, so this is your spoiler warning, because frankly, this is where the game shines, and it's what I really, really want to talk about.
Damn it. When did I run out of forms?
Oh, what a shame.
You don't have to be sarcastic about it.
Okay, let's talk about what made this game so personally difficult for me to talk about over the years. The simple truth is that it feels like nothing ever ends. And that's a good thing, but it makes it so damn difficult to talk about. The best example of this is the plot on Monarch, but let's take it from the top so that you aren't ultimately confused. Do expect spoilers here, but I'm going to be light on details wherever I can so that should you finish this and decide to go play the game, it still feels like you have plenty to experience for yourself. So if it seems like I'm leaving out a super important detail, do other people a favor and add a spoiler warning to your comment before you yell at me. That being said, what is the plot of The Outer Worlds? Put simply, there's a ship full of hibernating colonists who never got woken up because of technical difficulties, but when the colony of Halcyon faces the possible extinction of its people, a mad scientist by the name of Phineas Wells will wake up one of the frozen colonists and enlist their help in saving the colony. That colonist is you. The game is great right from the character creation screen, as Phineas will comment on the more extreme attributes you choose for your build, whether positive or negative.
Must remember not to sneeze near you.
After you get woken up, you'll be pretty much immediately skyrocketed down to the surface to get started on your quest in the tutorial section of the game set in our little company town of Edgewater. Don't worry though, the doctor's in your ear and he's hired a freelancer to guide you along the way who will be meeting you when you land. Well, I guess he did in fact meet us on the ground. You'll work your way to a ship where you will have a conversation that for me is the moment every playthrough where I go, oh yeah, I'm into this.
You know what? You're right. It's time we cross those marauders off, find whoever owns that ship, and file a full report. And it's gonna be fucking laminated.
Unfortunately, the ship is broken, and the quest to find a power regulator will be, for all intents and purposes, the tutorial. Right from the start, we get an example of how the game is so well designed and why it's so difficult to sort out footage for. Right outside the front door, you're gently encouraged to stop and talk to Silas, who will give you a side quest collecting gravesite fees for 4 members of the town. Here's how it spirals. To collect these gravesite fees, you will need to lean on the barber, generally by snooping through his back room to dig up a way for him to pay, teaching you right off the bat that you can be resourceful when it comes to completing objectives. The factory foreman won't argue with you, but you do get a little bit of world building as you get another look at just how much hold companies have over employees, making them property more than people. Likewise, Ludwig won't argue with you, but you can pick up a quest from him that will have you going after auto mechanicals along with learning how to modify weapons in the process. Last up is Abernathy, who was sick and will ask you to head out and recover some medicine, but before you leave, you're confronted by someone who asks you to give it to her so she can give it to people who need it more than him, presenting you with a simple moral choice early in the game. Just like that, one quest becomes four, and that's how the game blossoms out, always giving you something new to do. The main plot here, however, is that you need to get a power regulator for your ship, and there's only two available. The one running the town of Edgewater, and the one used by a group of deserters living beyond the grasp of Spacer's Choice. The head of the town, Mr. Thompson, will ask you to go down and turn their power off to send them back to the factory, but is kind enough to ask you to warn them first. You find them in a thriving community who have found a way to grow food again that has them free of the plague the artificial meals Edgewater is living off of has them dealing with. The leader, Adelaide, suggests you turn off the power to Edgewater instead, forcing the people of the city out to her. It's an interesting moral quandary where it seems the solutions provided by Adelaide are far superior, but by turning off the town you would probably damn many of them in the process. What the game doesn't tell you outright is that there is a path to peace where you can merge these two communities and make the best of both worlds. I won't outline for you here exactly what that is because I want you to explore it for yourself, but it's an early lesson that peace is often possible in places you didn't expect. It's also a lesson that shooting everybody works too. You ain't gotta be nobody's friend. However you solve the problem of Edgewater, its finish marks the end of your trial period and it's time to take to the stars. I feel like it's fair to say most players will be leaving with their first two crewmates in Pavarti and the Vicar. You'll head to the Groundbreaker where after a little bit of work you can pick up two other members in Felix and Ellie. The interesting part is that they'll all have different reasons to join you on the Unreliable. Parvati wants a chance to work on a ship, the Vicar essentially needs a ride as he follows his own journey, Felix wants to start a revolution and take down the board, Ellie will simply feel like she owes you after you do her a favor. We can skip ahead and mention that your last two members will be the Hunter Nyoka who you meet on Monarch, and Sam, a cleaning unit repurposed for combat. These characters are interesting to me in that they really toe the line between people and personalities a lot of the time, often feeling like they have one character trait, but the interesting part is how you find out more about them. They follow the RPG trend of having personal quest lines you'll follow to help them, and in this way you'll learn about them, and while there's some highlights such as the Vicar finding enlightenment and Nyoka putting her family to rest, they aren't insanely deep. I have a bit of a bad gauge because I compare everything to Mass Effect, but it is a fantastic yardstick for measuring crew missions and character growth against. The Outer Worlds isn't bad by any means, but it's certainly simpler, more intimate, I'd say for the most part. Your crew doesn't really seem to have nearly the impact in the galaxy that you do, and I think that combined with a lack of deep, interesting conversations to be had on the Unreliable, versus what you find on the Normandy, makes them feel just a little bit less special. With Garrus, you help him hunt down the man who betrayed his friends and help him get his revenge. With Nyoka, you're just helping her bury friends who didn't make it. I know they can both be impactful, but one hit me far more than the other. The biggest problem I've realized is that a lot of the crew stories can feel like a bit of a fetch quest. Go here, grab this, hunt that, find them. And I like all 5 of these stories, but it's not what makes these characters good. There's no quest to redeem a son a father had failed, no moral questions about what's right for a people. There are no moments quite as strong as this.
Look at the dead woman, Morton. It doesn't look like you saved her.
No, it doesn't. Worked with available data. Only option. No other possible. Doesn't matter.
But you see your team grow all the same, even if it's on a smaller scale. However, the way they will react real time as they stand alongside you is where the strength of the writing lies. I was just in protagonist mode, trying to find a way to work with everybody, and was shocked to find Felix putting his foot down, refusing to work with us if we worked with a monster such as the chairman in front of us. They became true friends in the way they don't let your moral compass define theirs. You may be able to talk them into some of the worst actions you commit, but it doesn't mean they will be silent soldiers about it. If you're wrong, they will tell you. Every one of them becomes more and more interesting the longer you walk with them beside you, and that is something I find truly interesting in this game that I oh so rarely find in others, if ever. But anyway, I digress. Back to the story. You come to the Groundbreaker in search of a nav key to get you to Stellar Bay so you can search out an info broker the Doctor needs. Here's where it gets confusing for me. It's entirely feasible to have the 10,000 bits you need to buy the key from Miss Gladys by the time you get here if you've been questing enough. So do I say you pick up the key and head off? Or do I talk about what I assume most first-time players will experience in lacking the funds and following the lead she gives you to follow up on a way to pay for what you need? I'm willing to bet the majority of players will do part or all of this Roseway quest, so is it part of the story or not? It's entirely optional, yet it will be part of the experience for most players. We're going to at least touch on Roseway, but you can see my confusion here, and this won't be the last time we talk about this kind of thing happening. We get sent to Roseway to investigate a distress signal sent by scientists at a secret lab there, and what we'll find is a whole ass mess, as we can choose to work our way through multiple not-so-secret labs in search of valuables to sell back to either the scientists who were working on them or to Miss Gladys, back on the Groundbreaker. It's a pretty cool set of missions filled with fun combat both in the open and in the labs, towing the line between making decisions about who the real bad guys are and if you want to anoint yourself their executioner, and even a pretty tense mini stealth section. How you handle all of this is entirely up to you, and I'd be interested to know how you handled each of these situations if you played it yourself. I'll leave it at this. I would suggest you play through it at least once, optional or not. Now, back on the Groundbreaker to get our nav key. Oh, I forgot, did I mention that as soon as you get here, you can turn in the Mad Doctor and completely change the trajectory of the plot? We'll discuss the bad options you can make towards the end of the game, but for now, we're just going to discuss my preferred playthrough. No, it is there, though. We get our nav key and head to Stellar Bay in the planet Monarch. Advertised as a desolate wasteland, it's pretty much just a group of people fighting to survive, and they're all pretty nice for the most part. Your goal is to get to the info broker and have him send the info to Dr. Wells, who has already paid for it and is waiting on it. With the help of Nyoka, we make the journey to his spot, and after fighting off the Marauders, we speak with him about why he hasn't sent our information. The long and short of it is that the two competing factions on Monarch, the Iconoclasts, a religious group, not quite a cult, but there's some dark stuff going on there, and on the opposite side, a corporation by the name of MSI, who produce some pretty solid motherboards, entry-level graphics card. Wait, no, sorry, wrong MSI. This one is run by Sanjar, who is an absolute nerd. Just seriously, what a dork. The objective becomes simply to get them to stop broadcasting, but how you do that is again optional. So we're here again, gonna talk about missions you don't technically have to do, but most players probably will. Sanjar will request that you go after a dangerous weapon in the form of the Bolt 52, which isn't exactly what I envisioned it would be. After you've done that, he'll send you to track down evidence of another corporation he suspects to be operating secretly on Monarch. With his Bolton evidence in hand, he agrees to stop broadcasting to free up the airspace you need. Then I moved on to Graham, the leader of the Iconoclasts, who insists that supplies for printing press are more important than things like, food for his people. To his credit, they are in dire need of new flyers.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. I keep forgetting we're out of pamphlets. Gosh, blast it.
His second-in-command Zora will ask you to help with the actual important things when you're off doing Graham's errands for him, such as buying supplies and rescuing what's left of the team he sent out. With his printing press up and running, he will also agree to stop broadcasting. With that, however, Zora will ask you a small favor, sending you to an old pirate base in which he hopes you'll find nothing. But what you bring back is some damning evidence that will have brutal implications for the Iconoclasts. It doesn't seem like it that this one piece of information is possibly the key for stopping NMSI and the Iconoclasts from going to war over the dwindling resources on the planet. We return to the info broker, and with the airwaves clear, we're a simple button press away from getting what we need. But not before a little meta commentary about the level padding so often seen in games. When we do step outside to flip the switch, we'll see a crashing ship, and the radio waves will again spark to life as both MSI and the Iconoclast react to the event, and both want the weapon system from inside the ship to help tip the odds in their favor in the upcoming battle. And yet again, we find ourselves in a spectacular quest that we can outright ignore if we want to. It's not part of the main objectives. We can just leave. But I'm willing to guess most players will get involved. I have to say, coming off Assassin's Creed Origins, which had some of the worst tedium and grinding of side quests I've ever personally encountered, to this, which does everything that game does wrong, just infinitely better, is such a breath of fresh air. I wish Ubisoft would take notes, but I'm positive they aren't going to. Anyway, you should choose to get involved. You can harvest the weapon, the system, and decide who to give it to. Or like before, in Edgewater, find a way to make peace between the two groups. It's a darker situation than before, and you'll have to make some choices some people might not approve of, but I think for the greater good, your lesser evils are justified in this case. However you decide to handle that situation, the main story will take you to Phineas's labs, where he will send you out to the beginning of the endgame as you head to Byzantium to recover the chemicals you'll need to safely revive the Hope's colonists. After meeting a not-so-bright contact, you'll be directed to the minister's house, and you can get in multiple ways as usual. I chose the parcel delivery route. Turns out, though, this guy we're looking for isn't the actual one we want. He's just a pawn in the game like the rest of us, but he is willing to help and sends us to the chairman's office. What we find there is a massive revelation. The colony is slowly dying off, and the board's plan is essentially to let it while saving only the elite and wealthy citizens. We get what we came for as we locate the chemicals and head to retrieve them, but when we do, we discover a chilling reality. If we want a chance at long-term success, the best plan is to take all the dimethyl sulfide, but doing so will kill people who are involved in the board's tests on hibernation. You can also take a smaller amount, but will severely hamper your ability to save the colonists on the Hope. So, do you save the few in front of you, or think of the many and make the harder choice? I can't tell you which is right, but I can tell you the choice weighs on me with each and every playthrough, and I've made both decisions. When you return to your ship, you'll get a message from Adjutant Akande who has an offer for you. Betray Dr. Wells and you'll be given a place in Byzantium as part of the board's plan to save the system. The plan where anyone not deemed elite will die. This path is genuinely dark, and one I wouldn't ever go down if I wasn't making a video, and I have to say it was tough to experience even knowing it was all going to be wiped away when I reloaded to save. The price of guaranteeing your own safety will be high, as you will not only betray Phineas, but also wipe out the town of Edgewater. Your crew can be convinced to stand by you, but they won't do it quietly. And if I'm honest, outside of when I had to, I couldn't bear to face them knowing what I had done. It would have been cool if your crew could decide to mutiny, leaving you on your own for your actions, but that may be asking too much. Frankly, I just don't like going down this path, so enter at your own risk. Let's talk about what I actually did. When Akande called in the first place, I told her to pound sand and headed back to the doctor, where you come up with a plan to skip the Hope away from the prying eyes of the board. Fun fact, if you're playing with a dumb character, which I haven't personally done yet but plan to, you can actually just yeet the Hope into the sun and end the game right here, which I think is hilarious. Anyways, we successfully skipped the ship, but Dr. Wells is captured, and after a meeting with the crew discussing it, we head off to the prison planet of Tartarus to save him. If you invested heavily in speech like I did, this mission can be a bit dumb because you can walk through the vast majority of it without firing a shot if you get yourself the right disguise. Don't get me wrong, you can fly through here guns blazing, disguise be damned, but regardless of which path you take, it's cool to see all the people you've helped from the Groundbreakers Mardettes, MSI, and the Iconoclast show up to help you fight your way through the place. You'll run into the chairman, but if you're rocking with Felix, he'll make it pretty clear there's only one acceptable way to handle that dude.
I've been waiting for this! Down they go!
We get to the end where Akande is holding Phineas before having a boss fight I was way too prepared for at this point in my playthrough. Although in my first run way back in 2019 where I didn't have DLC to level me and I didn't do as much side content, this was a pretty well leveled fight and I remember it being kinda tough. Here's what's really funny. I already had footage of shooting the adjutant, so I decided I was going to set up both my crew to melee only and watch them whoop that ass, but one of them had other ideas.
Why won't you just die?
Did you shoot her once? After I switched you to melee only? Felix! Unlock the Mad Doctor, and after a short conversation, we will mark the end of our game as a lengthy cutscene plays that recaps all of your actions you made over the course of it. It's cool, but I have to admit it really drags on, especially if you're seeing it for the second time within a few hours of each other. It seriously goes on for like 20 minutes, it's crazy. So yeah, that's the story of The Outer Worlds. I left out as much as I could, and I hope I did enough to summarize the experience for you while leaving room to play it yourself. Experienced players can be the judge of how I did that. Personally, I love the entirety of every playthrough of the game I do, getting absolutely lost in the world, bouncing from one quest to another in a whirlwind of excitement that I have to admit does come to a bit of an abrupt halt when you can't continue after the final mission, something I very much dislike in games. Let's move on and have a quick word about the side missions in the DLC before we wrap it up. Alright, where do we start with? Side content, DLC? Regardless, I want to keep this short because there's a ton of fun to be had both on and off the beaten path, and I want to encourage you to play it without spoiling too much. Let's just start with the side content. Frankly guys, it's fun. And rather than glossing over a bunch of different missions, I'll spoil just two that can be found mere minutes apart and show the sheer range of emotions you can experience in the game. First up is Make Spacesuits Won't Travel, in which a fashion designer will ask you to model 3 different outfits for her from Marauders, Spacers, and Iconoclasts. Collecting these outfits can be a bit of a pain, especially the Spacer one, which she'll be particularly picky about, but this isn't the end of your adventure. After modeling for her, she'll be inspired by what you've shown and will have you go traveling to more than one planet in search of exotic materials she will need to put together a whole new outfit that will be her best work. After all this work, her lazy ass will then ask you to head down the street to pick up a shipment of labels for her so she can finish her project. Fine. Whatever, I guess. It'll be over, and after being given the runaround, bouncing from window to window and back to another window, you can see what you've been striving for this entire time and enjoy the fruits of our labors. Oh, fuck me! Fuck me in the fucking ass!
Hey, careful. Don't go running around in the middle of a crime
I'm gonna freak
scene.
out, I'm gonna freak out, I'm gonna freak out, I'm gonna freak out, I'm gonna freak out. I've done so much
You mean Miss Jolie Kerr? She was reported for practicing a subversive aesthetic.
Are you
We found her in her office, working on something perverse. She didn't cooperate, so we had to put her down. Never took her for a dissident sympathizer.
You kills her over a fashion violation after all this goddamn work! Okay, that actually is fucking just excellent. Alright, hold up. That was actually... Alright, I'll admit it. That was worth it. I look fucking phenomenal. So, yeah, that... Jesus Christ. It's a bit of a roller coaster. On a very different note, some very angry woman is ranting and raving about poor people who will contract you to investigate the early retirement program, which gives poor workers the chance at a nice life in Byzantium. I won't call the result a true shock when you're this deep into the game, but it has to be said that regardless of expectations, walking into a room full of slaughtered innocents seeking the better life they were promised should hit you at least to some degree. Interestingly enough, when you get back, you have the option to lie to this absolute awful person about what you saw and trick her into wandering in herself. I don't really view this as a moral hang-up because she totally deserves everything that happens to her. There's a ton of other examples of fantastic side quests to be found here in the Outer Worlds, but I just like to leave you with these two as we move on to the DLC, starting with Peril on Gorgon. This one starts with a bit of intrigue as we find a hand wrapped around a recording device in a box. It's not the nicest way to get a message, but it will lead us to a desolate mansion and a mysterious benefactor willing to pay us handsomely to recover her dead mother's journal from her office at the Spacer's Choice lab. I had a great time just working my way through the DLC here. I'm not usually into stuff this open-ended, but man, just putting the pieces together and feeling so much smarter than I am was a load of fun. Noting the ridiculous amount of Adrena time just hanging around everywhere on Gorgon, and then finding the results of its prevalent use, and learning more and more about the connection to our plot, is just, The DLC will take you sprawling across an investigation as you work to uncover the secret of what really happened on Gorgon. I don't want to give you any more information than that, but suffice it to say, it's a great way to spend a few hours of your time and a fantastic addition to the game. The other DLC, and the last released, is Murder on Eridanos, which I promise I will mispronounce at some point. It's a super fun, cliche mystery plot as you play the dashing investigator chasing down leads on a murder. Kind of a noir vibe, but the Outer Worlds has its own twist on it. The plot is more or less predictable, but there's twists and turns and red herrings that keep it interesting throughout, and there's plenty of choices to be made that will make it fun. The DLC are both great, and if you enjoy the game, I would recommend picking them both up. And are probably worth the Spacer's Choice Edition if you're buying the game for the first time, even if I do not condone the upgrade cost for people who already own the game. So what's left? I suppose that would be the music, which, like all other things in this game, was just done so perfectly. It doesn't pass the playlist test, but I've argued before a game doesn't have to have songs I listen to every day to be great, and I stand by that opinion here. Let's take a look at some of the best musical work in the Outer Worlds, which has been credited to Justin E. Bell.
It's not the best choice. It's Spacer's Choice.
The Outer Worlds, for me, is just one of those games that needs to do well, so that we get more of them and they're better and better each time we get one. I'm sure that based on the time frame in which this video is going to be released that you're expecting me to compare this game to Starfield, and that's a fair expectation, but frankly, I just don't have many kind words to say about Starfield, and I feel like keeping the mood positive today. There's so much about this game that I love, and I'm glad I finally got to put this in front of you. It's nice to talk about how good a game is again. The story is tightly paced, but gives you plenty of time to really walk around in the world and understand it without it overwhelming you. The main narrative might not be the most impactful I've ever played, but the things it will naturally expose you to over the course of the experience more than make up for it. The stories you will be a part of, whether from strangers or your crew, can go from hilarious to heartbreaking, which is amazing to see from minute to minute. The combat is fast paced, full of style, and plenty of fun to keep you going for the entirety of your playthrough. The crew is better than I give them credit for, and the game wouldn't be as good without them. I already waxed poetic about how much I love the visuals and art styles in Halcyon, but I really do think they deserve all the praise. On top of that, the DLC were both fantastic additions that worked right into the story perfectly, and I would recommend them to anyone who enjoys the game. I don't know what else to say. I really like this game, and I'd like it if you gave it a shot. If you do, tell me how your experience was. That being said, I think it's time to wrap it up here, guys. Thanks for sticking around until the end, and if you're not subbed, I'd appreciate it if you hit that button. I'm hoping this video comes out on the 19th of October, but I really have no idea when it will, so, happy whatever today is. Whatever happens next, I'm excited to be done with Assassin's Creed and get back to only talking about games I think you should buy. That being said, Cyberpunk 2.0 went live a few hours ago, so I'd very much like to go enjoy that. This is Purple, signing off. Have a wonderful night, and always remember to smile. Thanks, guys.
Didn't I request no more fertilizer shipments be brought on board? Who keeps ordering these?
Who's bringing cows on my ship? Fuck it. Sick of the goddamn cows. Fuck this.
No one knows what the future has in store for Halcyon. All we know for certain is this: the name of the Unreliable and that of its intrepid captain will remain the subject of countless stories for years to come.